Uh, let's see if we get where's today we're in Daniel chapter 10, and we're not actually going to get into a prophecy with this one. It's actually 10 and 11 belong together because it's the same scene basically, where Daniel kind of like is praying in what people would call the Daniel fast in chapter 10, and then somebody comes. It's either the Son of God himself or it's an angel. I think there's good reasons on either side of that equation to think that, and I think the commentators and scholars seem to be kind of equally divided between those 2 points of view. But one of the things I wanted to do, like in this chapter, it's kind of a short chapter, really. There's a conversation that's being had between this figure, and he starts talking about the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece, and you get kind of a glimpse into what's been going on behind the scenes with all the politics that are going on during Cyrus's reign. And I think it's a great way to look at it. And but I wanted to start off with kind of a bigger backdrop. Sort of, I'm just going to take 5-10 minutes to kind of lay a backdrop and tell the story of, the heavenly powers and that sort of thing. Because you have in Daniel a lot of places where it throws around the prince of so and so, the prince, and sometimes it's talking about a human, sometimes it's not talking about a human. Sometimes you have this language in the Bible, which is you don't know if for sure if it's talking about an earthly king or a ruler or a power or something like that, or if we're talking about a demonic force, or if we're talking about something in the angelic realm, the unseen realm, one of the heavenly powers, so. But I think that there's a reason for this, and there's a way that Paul will talk about authority and authorities, and it's probably like so we'll probably get into stuff that kind of like you've already known but never really seen it put together or something. So I thought maybe it'd be helpful. So this is kind of a summary of what I call a summary of rulers and authority in the Bible, and it kind of starts off, to go from the beginning that God rules everything, that He is the ultimate authority and He is sovereign, but He saw fit to delegate authority to His sky rulers. I'm just going to call them sky rulers, and His earth rulers. In other words, the angelic / demonic realm, the unseen realm, and then the earth rulers, which would be humans. And these earth rulers, what's up, Aaron? So these earth rulers, the interesting thing, if you listen to like the last month or two of the Bible Project, they get into this whole thing about the firstborn in the Bible and this whole habit that you see, not habit, but you always see this thing of the firstborn, which you expect should get the blessing, is not the one who gets the blessing. It's always the latecomer. And then there's all these twists in the stories, and the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And you don't think about it, but but it goes all the way through the first couple pages of the Bible, where the humans are given authority to rule over creation, but they are the very last ones created. So it's the last ones on the scene. It's like the little brother is like put in charge.
Here's where the devil gets mad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so this apparently triggers kind of a rebellion of envy. It's sort of a thing that a lot of the ancient Jews and early church fathers kind of read between the line and said that, like that Satan was probably envious of man having been giving that authority and being made in the image of God. And as a sky ruler, so this triggers a rebellion in which a sky ruler, namely Satan, in the form of a land creature, who the humans are supposed to rule. They should have never listened to the snake. But a way to look at it would be that a sky ruler in disguise as one of the creatures that man should rule shows up in Eden, and he seeks to disrupt man's ruling relationship with God. So what he wants to do, and it's actually a brilliant tactic, right? Because the sky rulers, they're not going to die. They are immortal already, but man's been told that you will die if you don't rule, and you just take rulership into your own hands and think that I'm going to rule my way and seek autonomy from God. So he disrupts man's ruling relationship with God, and he's successful in that, at least for the time being, right? And what this does is that, like I said, the Elohim, it's another word for them. There's sometimes the word Elohim it's ambiguous. Sometimes it's plural, sometimes it's singular. In the singular, then it's a title for God, but in the plural, it can mean the angels, basically. It's the heavenly rulers. They had eternal life, which the humans did not, at least not yet, because they hadn't eaten from the tree of eternal life. So Satan managed to seize or maintain power over humans through their death. In other words, he had rulership above them already, but one way to safeguard his position would be to make sure that man's not going to rule on God's behalf, and therefore they're going to die. So he's a murderer from the beginning, as Scripture says. Go ahead, Aaron. You had a question?
Yeah, but I mean, the man started off with eternal life before they sinned, or are we talking about after they fell?
Well, we don't. He had not participated in the tree of the knowledge of. He had participated in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but he's given like two choices basically. So later on, this comes up in Scripture and says, now I put before you life and death. The tree of life. And so like you choose today life and death. It's kind of a recalling of the same thing that Adam and Eve had to face. Are you going to follow God and rule with him, or are you going to take matters into your own hand and try to be autonomous and rule just on your own behalf, right? So Satan managed to get this victory in death. Satan ruled in death and has ever since. But God had promised the woman that one of her seed would somehow defeat the serpent, even while being struck by it. You will strike at his heel and he will crush your head. So the seed of the woman, this seed, who's Christ, he would restore man's original destiny. He'd be the new Adam, right? He would rule with God, and ultimately the rebellious sky rulers would be replaced by restored humans. So I explained this a little bit more. So angels have always had this duty to rule in a way that serves man, and this is another theme even with us, that if you want to rule God's way, you also have to be a servant. It's not about ruling with an iron fist. It's about ruling with God's compassion and his heart in mind, that he wants to help his creatures, that he loves the ones he's made, right? So angels have always had this duty to serve in a way that serves man. In Hebrews 1:14, it says, aren't all angels, isn't it their duty, or I'm paraphrasing, to serve those who will inherit salvation? In other words, they are to guide us along and protect us, the ones who are going to be the restored humans. So they rule in areas. There's a lot of like territorial kind of language in the Bible that in this chapter we're going to see that you have the Prince of Persia, And they serve communities, like you have the communities in Revelation to the angel of the church of Sardis, of Laodicea, et cetera, et cetera. You also have Michael, who serves the people of Israel, the Jews. So they serve areas and nations, communities, et cetera. The rebel angels abused their authority. Instead of serving man, they decided to build their own kingdom or their own kingdoms. And so they became principalities, their own regions. And they succeeded in getting humans to serve them instead. So instead of getting humans to serve God or to serve the humans, they got humans they suckered humans basically into worshiping them instead. And that's what we call idolatry, or worshiping images. People were worshiping images of gods that the powers as the way that they imagined them. And the ironic thing was that they were made in the image of the Almighty God to begin with. So it's a great irony in that. So when man's own rebellion came to a head, and this, I'm talking about the Tower of Babel, and that's Babylon, basically, the Tower of Babylon, God scatters the humans and he put them under the authority of the fallen Elohim, or the fallen sons of God. That's in Deuteronomy 32. They had chosen to worship these entities, basically, and these fallen angels, they became the gods of the nations. They became the princes of the nations. But God chose Israel as his own inheritance. So you have this in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9. If you look it up in the ESV, I think you get a good translation of this. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, which was at the Tower of Babel, right, he fixed the borders and the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. The sons of God, if you're reading the New Testament, you're used to thinking the sons of God as in Christians, right? In the Old Testament, sons of God is a name for the heavenly beings in the council of God. So they were the high-ranking angels. So when you get to the sons of God language, and Paul's introducing that in the New Testament, he's like, isn't it amazing? Like what kind of grace has been bestowed on us that we humans can be called the sons of God. And and so they would have understood, the people that he was talking to, especially the Jews, would have understood what he was talking about, that we are being seated in heavenly places, and the gods of the nations who had rebelled, they're going to be replaced by humans who have followed Jesus, basically. It says, but the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob his allotted inheritance or heritage. So the picture is that God said, okay, you want to follow these idols and everything? Go ahead. They're going to be over your nations, and you will serve them. But I'm going to pick a nation of my own. So the very next narrative in the Bible after the Tower of Babel is when God calls Abraham. Says, come out from your people. And he was a pagan, Abraham and his family. But he says, I am going to be your God, and your people are going to be my people, and I will be their God. So the camp of Israel was depicted, fast forwarding to when they grew into a nation and God is shaping them in the wilderness. The camp of Israel was depicted as a type of Eden. So if you look at Eden imagery in prophetic poetry and that sort of thing, you see all these connections, but especially in the middle of it. So if you went into the tabernacle and you went into the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle were all these images of plants and of cherubim, the things that you would have seen in Eden, right? So Israel was a picture of humanity's rule restored. God is going to restore humanity back into the the ruling, what I call the ruling space of Eden. Kings and priests, which Adam and Eve were. They were kings and priests, also princes, along with the star imagery. So the stars, the heavenly host, were connected symbolically to the powers that be in heaven. When David's looking at the stars and says, when I consider the stars in the heavens, he's not just thinking outer space kind of stuff. He's thinking, why would you even consider man when I consider the heavenly host? And, you place man just underneath the angels, and if you've crowned him with glory. But if you read Hebrews 2 carefully, in the NIV especially, you'll see that what the writer of Hebrews is doing is he's saying, you made man a little lower than the angels for a little while. And even Jesus came and he was under little lower than the angels for a little while. But now we see Christ lifted above all authorities, above the angels and everything, seated at the high place. And that has implications for all of his followers. As Peter said, we will judge even angels. So Israel as a nation would fail, and it would fail often, but through her would come the seed that would not. In other words, the son of man in Daniel 7. He would restore man's original destiny, and they would rule the nations that God had scattered. So the big part of the gospel is that you don't have to serve. You're no longer under the thumbs of these other so-called gods. God is commanding all of you to be united under him again and serve him alone. So all authority is given to Christ. That means all the authority that, so he is the chief authority. He's the firstborn in creation, who is the image of God. He's the very image of God. The Son of Man is above the angels, and his followers rule with him, being transformed into his image and being seated in heavenly places, being sons of God. So that's kind of a backdrop, just to see, and we'll see more parts of this as we go along with this. So verse 1, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So far we have not gotten to this part of history yet with Daniel. So this must be very late in Daniel's life, because we're talking Cyrus has already come in, and he is king of Persia. And a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. That was his Babylonian name. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. In the King James Version, it says, but the appointed time was long. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. We're not going to get into the vision this week, but we'll get into the vision. We're not going to get into the prophecy in this vision until next week. But this whole, we are going to see this either angelic visitation or the Son of Man visiting him. So by this time, one group of Israelites is already back from exile. So if you read Ezra and the things that are going on in Ezra that he's talking about in that book, this is while Daniel is in Babylon still. So those time periods overlap, right? So one group of Israelites is already back from exile because of Cyrus's decree. You'll read in Ezra all about Cyrus's decree and how they were trying to get things started in Jerusalem, and they have a decree from him, but they're facing unbelievable opposition while they're there. Yeah.
Do you think Jerusalem was like empty at this time? Or do you think Babylonians were occupying it, or did they leave some Israelites?
No, the Babylonians left a lot of the poor and the weak there, and the old people that weren't going to be useful to them and couldn't make the journey to Babylon anyway. And then one of the things they did, it was like to kind of weaken people, is they'd move one group of people away from their home and move another group of people. They keep people out of their homelands and kind of disorient, keep them off balance. By this time, a lot of who's ended up in Jerusalem and in that area are the Samaritans. So, and they've intermarried and everything. So you have like a group of well, what the Jews ended up considering half-breeds.
Yeah.
And that kind of like is one of the things that triggers their dispute with the Samaritans and why they look down on them and everything. And they've kind of like been following God, but they're kind of doing it their own way. Like the Samaritans made their headquarters and their temple like up in I think Shiloh or wherever.
Something to do.
Yeah, Gerizim, and like the Mount Gerizim. So they had all these kind of similarities, but they're very different and they didn't like each other. So, they're going back to rebuild in a place where they're not even, and so like Ezra and his crew, they go back and other people who had been living there are actually volunteering to help with the rebuilding, and they're like, no thanks, we don't need your help, we don't want your help. And so it was like a lot of bad blood. So things are tough for them. I don't know if they could have made things a little better for themselves or not, but they're facing a lot of opposition, especially under this guy named Cambyses. What's happening is that Cyrus has made a decree, and Cyrus is favorable to the Jews, but his son is not. And in the meantime, Cyrus is going off and doing all these military campaigns while his son is running things, and his son doesn't like the Jews. So he's making it hard for them as well. And here in Ezra 4, we record something else that's going on, where the people are, it says, then the people of the land, this is back in Jerusalem, right? The people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. So they're kind of intimidating them, saying, you can't build here. And they bribed counselors against them to frustrate their purpose. They were bribing counselors to Cambyses and other officials within the Persian court. And there was a lot of things going in the Persian court which were anti-Israelite. All right. So all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. This isn't the Darius we've been talking about, not Darius the Mede, but Darius the Persian, who lived later. So what's happening here is that in verses 2-6 here, it says, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. He's mourning because they can go back and rebuild, but everything's just being so difficult, and people are dying and people are being bought off, and it's just not going well in the Persian court for the Jews, right? So he says, I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for full 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the first month, I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris. So it looks like he's back in Babylon, and not in Persia. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like a flaming torches, and his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. So either this is the Son of God, or this is a very powerful angel, it would appear, right? So he's mourning because this is spiritual warfare. A lot of things, like he could look around and tell that whatever's happening and the quote bad luck that we're having in Jerusalem and in the Persian court is spiritual in nature. And it's kind of an eye-opener to us because we don't really think that much a lot of times about what kind of spiritual things are going on in our politics. World politics is dominated by principalities and powers. That's the picture that you get from Daniel here, is that he's fasting and then he has somebody showing up, and he's letting Daniel know what kind of a battle it's been in the heavenly realm. And that's something that even Paul brings up. He says, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities, powers, the rulers of this age. So Here in Revelation 1, we get sort of a description of Christ, the glorified Christ, and there are some similarities here. You know, you got a belt of fine gold of Uphaz around his waist. Here you have the Son of Man clothed in a long robe. So, you know, in Daniel, it's clothed in linen with a golden sash around his chest. His hairs were like white wool, like snow. And if you remember the Ancient of Days scene in Daniel 7, you had the Ancient of Days with white hair, like, you know, so it's like here, like father, like son, right? His eyes were like the flame of fire, and his feet like burnished bronze. Again, here, Daniel, you have this, eyes like flaming torches, appearance of lightning, you know. His voice was like the roar of many waters. In Daniel, it's his voice is like the sound of his words, the sound of a multitude. You know, so there are a lot of similarities here. And there's a lot of you could say that Revelation and Daniel are kind of companion books. You know, a lot of stuff from Revelation comes straight from Daniel. In his right hand, he held 7 stars. And from his mouth came a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. So when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Daniel's going to fall too. He's going to fall on his face. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not, I am the first and the last and the living one." Daniel's also going to be touched by maybe the Son of Man, and he's going to be lifted up, right? Or, you know, restored. "Fear not, I am the first and last and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore the things that you have seen, those are about to take place. As for the mystery of the 7 stars," here, he's got stars in his hand, right? "That you saw in my right hand, the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches." So some commentators have said, well, you know, why is he writing a letter to angels? You know, like, because he's going to end up writing 7 letters to 7 angels. And so that must be the pastors. But then you have the pastors of this church depicted as stars. But either way that you look at it, you know, I think that they're angels myself, you know. And again, you have this depiction of angels or some kind of stars that are in custodianship of communities of churches. So again, you have that same sort of language, star language, and you know, that they are rulers and princes over certain peoples.
Angels are often described as being, or the words also used to describe messengers.
Yeah. And sometimes, and some people will go, you know, the messenger angels are a different class. I don't know. And sometimes people are called messengers. So it's, you know, they're always, you know, John himself actually he falls at the feet and starts worshiping one of these angels, and is quickly corrected, you know, says, "Hey, make sure you don't do that, because I am a servant of Christ just like you are." That's what he says. So yeah. After this, I looked, and the sanctuary, this is later in Revelation 15, and it's something to consider. After I looked, and the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was open. In other words, there's a tabernacle in heaven. There was like a temple in heaven. Every sanctuary that you've seen on earth that God had built was modeled off of something up there. Moses, what he saw on the mountaintop, he was told, what you've seen up here, go and build it down there. And that's, Hebrews makes a point of that, says these were copies of the heavenly things. But this is the real thing. This is the one in heaven. And he sees 7 angels to 7 plagues. So are these the same 7 angels? We don't know. But they're clothed in pure bright linen. So there you have angels in bright linen with golden sashes around their chests. So we could still be talking about an angel in Daniel 10, right? A thing to point out here is that the bright linen and the sash around there, it is also understood to be priestly garments. So it's almost as if you to say that, like you have angels performing a priestly role in heaven. They're being priests in heaven, going into the sanctuary, doing priestly kind of duties is what it looks like here. They're dressed up kind of like priests, and they're doing something. And you see one angel, for example, in Revelation, take the fire of the altar of incense, and he takes the fire and he throws it down and everything. But they're doing custodial things and keeping the temple in heaven, just like you would have human priests doing that function on earth. Sometimes I think of it as like embassies, right? You have heaven's embassy on earth in the temple, and earth's embassy in heaven as a temple. But now, of course, Christ calls us the living temples. So we're living ambassadors and embassies because of what Christ has done. So back to Daniel, verses 7-9. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. This reminds me of Saul on the road to Damascus. Remember, he hears a voice, but the people around him, they didn't see anything, and he sees a bright light, and they don't see it, but it kind of probably freaks everybody out. So I was left alone, and I saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. Just like John, he's going to kind of fall on his face, right? My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, kind of like John did. And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. So another similarity there is that we're not told in Revelation this, but John, we know as the apostle who Jesus loved. It's like you have Daniel, who's called greatly loved. He's also called greatly loved in chapter 9, verse 23. But John, who's the disciple who Jesus loved. And the funny thing is that, like, you have Daniel writing about this appearance of a man, calling him greatly loved. We would think, well, this is almost braggadocious, right? It's like, well, he said it, but then you also have John in his writing, the one who Jesus loved. That was John writing that. So, yeah, in the Gospel of John, he won't name himself by name, but he'll go, and the one who Jesus loved. Spurgeon once says, "I know of no greater blessing that can happen to any man or woman here than to be assured by the Spirit of God that they are greatly beloved by the Lord." And I don't think that John is being braggadocious, like Jesus liked me better than everybody else. Maybe he did, but he's just like, that he knew that Christ loved him. He just knew how much Jesus loved him, and I think that that's as humble a thing you can say,
And I think the way he worded it was to be humble rather than.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Then he said to me, "Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words." So think of this. It's God heard him on day one. Daniel's been tarrying for 3 weeks.
What do you mean by waiting?
Waiting, tarrying, and also just fighting a spiritual battle. Like, sometimes God will just put a burden on your heart, and you need to pray about this, and you don't feel released until you feel released. My parents prayed for me for a long time when I was lost, And I wasn't even saved yet, but then there came a point where they had a peace and said, this is all going to work itself out, and they were done with it, with that part of it. And it was only probably a matter of months before I was saved. But it's kind of like, I think that Daniel has been given a supernatural burden, and he just knew that he had to pray, and he involved himself in this spiritual warfare, which it was. And it's going to take this long because there is a struggle in the heavenlies. So if you go to verse 13 here, it says, the prince of Persia withstood me 21 days. In other words, this messenger is basically saying, I was resisted for 21 days. It's taken me a while to get down here to even talk to you, right? But Michael, one of your chief princes, so he's talking about, like Daniel as an Israelite, Michael, one of your chief princes, came to help me. And for I was left there with the kings of Persia. So I don't know if this is an all-out war kind of situation, or if this is a political courtroom kind of situation. It could be either way, a lot of the way that this was working out, like you said, polemic, right? You like the word polemic. It's a politics war.
That's
As
the word
much as-
John used in, I think, in Revelation, for the war in heaven, it was a polemic war.
Yeah, it's a polemic war. So Michael comes there he came here to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. This the prophecy that Daniel's going to be given in the next chapter is going to lead him basically from Daniel's time until the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. But here he's already telling him that this actually has something to do probably with the last days, something that's probably even future to us. So it's another one of those things where we're going to be able to follow in the next chapter very closely what happened in history. It's very detailed in history, and this was all laid out for Daniel before then. And then you're going to get to a point where you're going, wait a minute, I don't think this is talking about that period in history anymore. This is something that's still to come for us. That's why I think of a lot of these things, again, is like already, but not yet. And I came to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. This is another reason, and I won't get into it that much today, is that that I have warmed back up to the gap theory thing that we were talking about. That there is something that is about the Jewish people in the latter days. For the vision is for days yet to come. Note that the length of Daniel's mourning it coincides with the length of this unseen struggle. So it's like, as long as he'd been praying is how long it took for, action started on the day that he first started praying, and it lasted all the way up until then. And there was struggle the entire time. And then like when we see what was happening in Ezra, all of that was like things that were probably what Daniel, whether he realized it or not, I think he did realize it because he understood what was going on. He's so close to the courts anyway. He's there like in Cyrus's courts, right? So he knows like the shenanigans that are going on in politics, and he's hearing about the things that are happening in Jerusalem, and they're ugly, and he's just burdened by this. It's a spiritual warfare for him, and it's a spiritual warfare for the ones that are being sent to him.
I was thinking when I first read this chapter, and they were talking about the guy showing it to talk to Daniel.
Mhm.
When I first read it, I was convinced that this was Jesus.
Right.
But these verses, I would think that
Yeah.
it'd be with the people resisting him. I
right.
can't see
So
happened that with Jesus, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're going, okay, well, with Jesus, but the thing is that like Jesus hasn't been given all power and authority
Oh,
yet,
at that point,
right?
yeah.
So maybe that's got something to do with it. And he's like, he isn't incarnate yet. So but he is up to something. Like what was Jesus doing this whole
So
time?
I guess he
You know,
still
so
could be.
yeah, so he could be that he's here and he's fighting this war along with Michael and everything, but he hasn't taken on his earthly mission as a man yet, but he will, and he will be the Son of Man. And when he does get raised from the dead, then all authority is going to be given to him, and he's
So
going to
at
be
that point,
placed.
these people wouldn't have any power over him at all at that.
Yeah, so he's
Ooh.
so I don't know. I don't know how that all works. Okay, I'm speculating. But that's why I'm not 100% sold to one way or another
I
on
can see
this.
how there could be.
Yeah, there's something he says later kind of sways me one way, but I don't know. So Ellicott, this is Ellicott's like a commentator from like 150 years ago or whatever. He says, the prince of the kingdom, he goes, perhaps no single verse, I just like the way he sums this up. No single verse in the whole of scripture speaks more clearly than this upon the invisible powers which rule and influence nations. If we were without a revelation, we should have thought it congruent that God himself should direct all events. In other words, God's just directing everything firsthand, right? That we should think that he directs all events in the world without using any intervening means. But Revelation points out that as spiritual beings carry out God's purpose in the natural world and in the moral world, so also do they in the political world. From this chapter, we not only learn that Israel had a spiritual champion, which is Michael, to protect her in her national life and to watch over her interests, but also that the powers opposed to Israel, so in this case, Persia, had their princes or saviors, if you want to call them that, which were antagonists and of those which watched over Israel. The princes of the heathen powers are devils, according to 1 Corinthians 10:20. So I just like the way he puts that. Princes and principalities. So from the New Testament, we get this. Ephesians 1:21, far above all principality and power and might and dominion in every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. Ephesians 6:12, it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Principalities is a region that prince rules. So that's principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. These are rulers. For by him all things were created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible. Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. This is I love this. Jesus, all of these principalities and powers, to begin with, he was the one that created them, and he created them for himself. So he is the firstborn of all creation, which means he's the preeminent one. But as a man, as Hebrews says, that he was made for a while a little lower than the angels, just like mortal man would have been, any mortal man would have been. And but now he, because of his resurrection and what he did and everything, he's been given, all power is given to him. Go therefore, Colossians 2:15, it says, and having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Were you guys at Cottonwood this last Sunday?
Yeah, we're going off this watch.
Okay, remember Pastor Bayless brought this up, that he said that like what you would do after you defeated, you would take their generals and you would parade them down the street. This is where he was talking about, he made a show of them openly triumphing over them in it. So he says spoiled. Other translations I think say shamed the principalities and powers. Satan, the prince of this world, so the main one. And it says, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. So the prince of this world. Hereafter I will not talk much with you, for the prince of this world cometh and has nothing in me. This is a little before Jesus is about to be crucified.
What do you think it means? He cometh and has nothing in me.
I don't know what hath nothing in me, and this is from King James.
Wait, is that the words of Jesus? Is that red letters right there?
Yeah, it's a red letter. I think this is like where he's in the at the Last Supper, if I remember right. I'm not going to talk much with you, but the prince of this world comes, so I think it's like Satan's gonna come for me now. That sort of, and what Christ,
In line with-
yeah, well, the interesting thing is that like it looked like sort of an operation, like after, remember when Jesus is saying, don't tell anybody what you saw at this Mount of Transfiguration and everything, shh, about this. I think what it was that it was a psyop kind of operation. Where Jesus was like, come and get me, guys. But they didn't know that if they killed him, that would be their own defeat.
That's really, he set 'em up.
Yeah, he set them up. He punked them. In other words, he got them to, you know, like do what was worse for them, and they thought they had triumphed. So that's so. Paul once says, and I forget where he says that, it says, if the rulers of this age would have known, and he's not talking, I don't think, about like Pilate and you know, but he's talking about the rulers of this age, these principalities and powers. If they would have known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. They wouldn't have done it if they would have known what was going to happen, you know. So yeah, there was some kind of psyop there, to put it that way, you know.
I like when we talk about that, like what you're saying, and like the polemic war idea of it's really a battle of the mind. Like even Satan was battling for the hearts, if you will, of the other angels. And
Yeah.
and for humans, it's always the controlling of the heart and mind like that, you know. Like,
Yeah.
so tricking them kind of like a psyop. It sounds funny because it sounds such a modern term, but
Yeah,
that's been going
that's
on
it's
forever and ever.
we know what a psyop is, so it's just easy to understand it that way. Yeah,
Psychological operation.
yeah. It's just kind of like he got the principalities and powers to come after him.
Like, oh no, I don't have any weapons.
You know, yeah. And Satan was testing him first, you know, kind of like, who are you? You know, what's going to happen if you throw yourself off this building? Seeing, you know what, you know, I think beyond other things, he's like fishing for information, like, you know, like, can we kill this guy, or what's this all mean?
That's my understanding, where it says, what I see for the prince of this world coming, which I mean, to me, it's the world is the devil.
Yeah,
I mean, we live in his world even today,
right.
and pretty much saying has nothing in me, which is Jesus says he has nothing in me.
Yeah,
That's what I get from that. I don't know that.
Like there's
Yeah,
nothing
right
Satan in me, like
He has nothing on me.
Yes,
Yeah,
nothing to do with.
maybe. I'd like to see some other translations of that, because I don't know what it says.
Hereafter, I will not talk much with you, for the prince of this world is coming or cometh, and pretty much saying has nothing in me.
Yeah,
That has no control over me, which he doesn't, not over
No.
Jesus, but he does over other people.
Yeah.
You know, even today.
yeah, and Satan got very close to sifting Peter out like wheat, you know, and so, but I've intervened for you. You will make it, but you will deny me 3 times.
He's
Yeah.
a prince of, is it lies
Yeah.
and deception.
So verses 15 through 17. When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and I was mute. And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. This is sounding a lot like Isaiah 6, you know.
that's like a plural, children of man.
What in the likeness of the children of man? He's like, this person just looked like a human, you know.
Oh, so he's saying like it's something's heavenly, but it looked like a person.
It's the same guy that we haven't seen anybody else show up. I think
It's
he's
the
just
same guy.
it's the same person, you know. Then I opened my mouth and I said of him, well, okay, let me pause here while I'm thinking of it. Remember in Daniel 7 when he sees the vision of like the horn and the or that's Daniel 8, sorry. Well, he does have an angel there, Gabriel, tell him all about it. But on the other side of the canal, there was a man who says, Gabriel, tell Daniel what this vision means. So somebody's telling Gabriel what to say. So that, and another, a lot of commentators will say that's probably the Son of God right there. So again, I don't know. But so you have him touch his lips, and I opened up my mouth and I said to him who stood before me, "Oh my Lord, by reason the vision pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord?" This is kind of what makes me lean a little bit more to it being Christ, right? It's like, how can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? I know that sometimes people would say my Lord to just somebody who was over them and who they respected. So it's not necessarily like that, but it does sound like it, right? For now, no strength remains in me and no breath is left in me. So in Isaiah 6:5, remember, he goes, "Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined." This is when Isaiah ends up in the heavenly council and he's there before God and God's angelic court, right? He goes, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. And of course, there's a seraphim who comes and touches a hot coal to his lips and takes his sin away. But it seems there's a little similarities here with the touching of lips and Daniel thinking that he's undone because of who he's talking to, the way that Isaiah felt like he was undone when he saw the King. And you think of it, this is something that comes up in scripture often, where somebody goes, I'm a dead man because I just saw the Lord. Because they know in the back of their mind, no one can see God and live. So the question then is like, well, who were you just talking to? I was talking to the angel of the Lord, or whoever, or in Isaiah, he's seen the King, right? And you're like, well, so was this Yahweh or was this someone else? And the answer is yes. This is how we get to the idea of the Trinity, kind of, and it wasn't a new idea to the Jews at all. Like say in the first century, they understood that the angel of the Lord is separate from the Lord, but it is the Lord. So, and okay, the angel of the Lord go, okay, I'll wait here while you go and get your thing so you can get your sacrifice together, and I'll meet you here and I'll eat something with you and all that kind of stuff. And then when they leave, this person's like, I'm a dead man because I just saw God, right? And you're like, well, was that a messenger of God or was that God himself? And the answer is yes. It's like they're both one and the same. So the idea of Christ being the one that people could encounter face to face, the image of God, but not die, is the one who has always been the Christ. The angel of the Lord figure, this Isaiah he's seen the King, and he thinks that he's dead because he's seen the King. Well, who was the King? And I think that maybe he saw a vision of Christ. It's one of these things that the New Testament writers will vamp on once in a while. So verse 18, again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, "O man, greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong and of good courage." And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Lord, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." So he's gotten strength from an angel, maybe. And let my Lord speak. I don't know. Seems like the Son of Man to me. Then he said, "Do you know why I've come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia." So he's going to go back and fight the prince of Persia again, whoever that is. And then when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. Who's going to be associated with the prince of Greece? That's going to be Alexander the Great, right? And so the spiritual force that gets Alexander the Great, this big war campaign. And think of this, he's going to have to fight again, probably for Jerusalem's survival, because when Alexander the Great was doing his campaign, he was going to run into Jerusalem and level it, right? But something happened. Something happened, and Josephus, that at least according to Josephus, the historian, that's miraculous. And I'll tell you all about it next week. Okay. But I will tell you that what is inscribed in the book of truth, that there is none who contends by my side against these except for Michael, your prince. So Benson said something interesting. He goes, and there is one that holdeth with me in these things, but there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael, your prince, which is King James. This may mean that the Jews had no friend in the court of Persia, and who would cooperate with the angel to forward the prophet's designs on behalf of his people, but Michael, their prince, and that Daniel must depend on him alone to disappoint the devices which were forming against them. I like that Benson's thinking about the court of Persia here, as a kind of as Benson thinking of like so he's thinking of it as a polemic war, and he's recognized that too. So the first verse in chapter 11 actually belongs, it probably should have been part of it. It should have been like added onto this, so that's because there's a little bit of continuity there. It says, but I will tell you what is inscribed by the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these except for Michael, your prince. And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. So this coincides in chapter 9, Darius the Mede, the first year, and Daniel humbling himself and interceding with his people. So it appears that Daniel, when he prayed that first time about the 70 years, may have been humbling himself and had a burden on him because of spiritual warfare that was going on with this character and Michael, because he says the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. So there was a polemic war going on there too, with Daniel and everything. So anyway, we'll pick up. We actually got through a whole chapter today. Yeah.
Man, I wish you could visualize all this spiritual stuff around,
Yeah.
I was thinking of someone in my life that I have like struggles with, and they have a drinking problem, and it's like every time they come in the room almost, it's like stressful. Even if they're not drunk, and I'm like, man, is it spiritual? Like, it's I at one time I believe they were saved. I'm like, is there like a demonic force kind of clinging to them, or like I pictured it almost like it's already hard to walk, and it's like something, the demonic thing is just like a weight that's holding on to them all the time to make their life progress slower and worse.
Yeah.
I wish we could see,
Yeah.
understand.
What I like in this one, in this chapter, especially is that we have the benefit of actually seeing what went on in history while this is being described to Daniel. So you get a little bit from both sides of this. What would the conversations look like with our very local struggles, say with your friend or whoever, about what was going on in the heavenlies, about that, the struggles in the heavenly realm just for our individual lives, those sorts of things.
So interesting to me to think of what is that actual like the principalities and stuff. What is their actual, I guess, the work they did, or okay, they wanted to put like a certain king in place because he was evil, let's say, like, how would their intermingling human affairs actually look, on paper, like, in actuality, it's like. hard to imagine.
Somehow they got to be able to influence people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what does that look like? I don't think most people, like walk around thinking, oh, I was influenced by this principality to go do this and make this decision. I think they're totally unaware of it.
I've just been reading Kings and I'm like just thinking about Solomon, he drives me crazy, like. It just says how good he was, or he did this great, then it's like, and then he offered sacrifices at the high place or whatever. And it's like, so maybe him like with his first Egyptian wife, like, would that be like one of the principalities, like using that Egyptian princess to like, oh, we can, if you know what, if we get him, take one of these foreign wives, we can get his focus off God, so let's tempt him with her or something. I guess that simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's simple.
like, we don't know like to what extent their involvement is, like, say, like in our personal lives,
Yeah.
but I pretty much can guarantee you it's that we underestimate how much it is. Like pretty much 100% sure that we don't realize like how much they do, and mingle in the affairs and in our affairs and mess with us. And I think people who have spent a lot of time in spiritual warfare have like a lot of better idea. And it's not fun and games, but but especially people who will put themselves out and be prayer warriors, and carry that burden. I think those are the people who probably got the best idea of like, how much of a spiritual struggle there is.
There's that spiritual, there's a spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Especially if somebody stated that's not.
Right.
Especially in the beginning.
Yeah, and even throughout the walk, because we can have those struggles, and I believe that the struggles come from.
And it's
the
weird
spiritual
how,
darkness.
and it's weird how the struggles change after time.
They're different.
When you're young, you get tempted by different things as you do when you get older. Things change. And you find out that doesn't happen. Try this.
Physical darkness and darkness. It's different. Than it talks about the spiritual
I may have read that one.
Frank Peretti.
Yeah.
I started reading the second book, this was years ago.
In that Daniel 10:19, when you talked about
I'm sorry, Gary.
in Daniel 19 and Daniel 10:19.
10:19.
Yeah, when he's talking about he needs strength. Well, first thing I thought of was Matthew 11:28. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden. He's saying he's feeling weak. Well, he would be weak, I would think, because he hasn't been eating either
Yeah.
for 3 weeks. But then at the same time, it makes me look at 1 John 5. You had mentioned earlier about the Trinity. It brings it up in 1 John 5 and verse 7. But if you look up at verse 3 of 1 John 5, it says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith." And then as you go down, it talks about the Trinity. And it says, "For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. And these three are one." I don't know, it just said, come to me when you were talking about that.
No, well, we were talking about Daniel 10 what now? Verse 19, you said?
Yeah, 19, when he says he's, talking about needing strength
Okay.
because he felt weak. It's like,
Okay.
yeah. And, you know, and he says you're supposed to come to him, come to Jesus. And you're wondering if it was Jesus or not. I'm assuming it was Jesus.
Yeah. Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me.
Yeah.
Yeah, gave him supernatural strength. Something that oh, interesting.
And I think there's even a part in Isaiah there, in one of the Isaiah chapters, that talks about similar situation. Because eventually he talks about getting, you know, you're weak and he gives you strength as an eagle.
All right.
It's God with you.
I wonder what it is with like these visions and everything that like completely, you know, like completely knocks out some of these people who experienced them, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like their body can't take it. You know, like you never think of like, oh, I saw this and my body couldn't take it.
Oh, yeah, I was talking to another Christian, we were talking, well, we weren't tight.
Yeah, he wasn't even, you know, and he's not even a spirit. I mean, he's in the spirit, but you know, it's a spirit man. But as far as his physical body, he's weak.
Mm-hmm.
We're all weak.
But I was talking, and we were talking about reading in the presence of Jesus. And I had mentioned something, and I was like, well, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if I'm not straight on my belly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, rather than just being on your knees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I bet you more people are going to be on their bellies just falling out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though we're loved and we're accepted, we haven't been in the true presence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when I see all these people here, what their examples were, if they fall down like they're dead,
Mm-hmm.
are we better than them?
No, we're not.
You know, that's what that's you know, that's where I
Yeah,
see
I mean, if is it like a thing where like Daniel's so overcome, like emotionally speaking,
overall,
which is what I picture. You know, like if I was in the presence of God, I'd just be like mentally I couldn't take it or something.
there's
You
not
know,
going to be any bravado, none of the macho
No.
stuff. There's no place for that.
no,
All the lies you built up to strengthen you up, that's out the window.
yeah,
Yeah, the Old Testament, you know, in those days, people would they would pray, like you said, flat out. Nowadays,
They were very
they're on
arrogant.
their knees or they go to a secret place
Mhm.
and they pray. I think it's all the same, and you know, I find myself not lately, but when I was having to pray for family. If someone, a loved one, so I find myself on the ground,
Mm.
not on my knees. You know, just praying for whatever. And when I've done that, before I would just get on my knees. I was taught as a little kid before I go to bed, you could get on my knees
Mhm.
and pray at the bedside. But as I got older, I just felt having to get as low as I can, worship him for the great I am. But yeah, and just to get back on that, what we were talking about earlier, when people do get saved with them, with this young walk with Christ, there's the devil just is saying, I lost another one, right? You lost another one with
Mhm.
Christ.
Mhm.
So he's gonna throw all kind of things at them, temptations, all habits, until they get not so much as when you get wiser in Christ, it could be when they're 18 years old or they're 70, whatever age it is, then you get to realize he has no problem. Not to say we're not gonna have him think, but it's there, but you know, you got the sense enough and the wisdom enough to cure whatever the devil throws at you. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, you have a good evening.
All right, see you, John.
You bet.
See you, John.
I gotta get
Yeah.
ready for tomorrow.
I think I'll end this recording at least here.